tonight to answer all of our questions during a Q&A time. But I'd first like to give them a chance to come up, introduce themselves. I know many of you have listened to them on the radio or have had a chance to see them obviously now tonight for the last few hours to share some of their story in their lives, but I'd love them just to introduce themselves real quickly to you. So John Christie, since you made the movie, how about you go first?
All right, thank you. Thank you everybody for coming. I do want to make one disclaimer in the beginning. That screen adds about 180 pounds to your image. So just please be aware of that, because I think tomorrow starts my diet. So, and I'm not joking. Again, thank you everybody for coming out. I really want to take a moment to thank my family, my wife Brandy, my son Chandler, who actually Chandler was with me through this whole experience as one of the camera operators. They put up with me a lot through, especially the editing process. You know, I'd come out of the room saying, this is stupid, why am I doing this? It makes no sense, it's dumb, I hate it. I'd go back in the office, I'd edit for a couple hours, come out and go, wow, this movie is great. This is really good. So, you know, they put up with my emotional outbursts, and I love you guys and thank you so much. Shirley Montalvo, who's the co-producer of the movie, she's been great. She's helped us a lot with a lot of things. And my family at Lake Hills Covenant Church in El Dorado Hills, you know, not just financial support, but prayer, and just great people. I really thank you. And
I want to thank my family as well, Brandy, Braden, Talissa up there for putting up with that. But I got to tell you, I want to thank you, John. I think that's the first Christian-based film I've ever seen that was actually fair to the atheist viewpoint. Seriously, thank you so much. I mean, I know, you know, at the end you had your say, you said what you said, and that's perfectly fine. I don't have any problem with that. But like I said, you know, I think, several people do films that are not so fair. So that was the biggest thing. And you know, going into this, you told all of the atheists we were working with, you know, David has supervising, you know, editing credits, and he's going to have say-so. He's going to be in charge of that. But you had your finger on the mouse button, you know? And I didn't even know,
all the signed agreements, so.
Yeah, he had the agreements, and I didn't even know if the proof I watched was the same one they were going to show tonight. So.
He literally asked or worried about that last night.
I joked about it.
I don't think he was joking.
All right, so in just a minute, we're going to open up the mic for some question-answer time. I'd like to invite Shirley, if you would. She's got cards and pencils. If you'd like to write your question down again, these guys have committed to answer every single question on the Facebook page or live tonight as we have time. Time is limited, so I'm going to ask you to, if you'd like to ask a question, to come over to this side. We'll have the microphone just down here. But I would also like to just, for the sake of time tonight, ask two quick requests. Number one, please ask precise, specific questions or make a specific statement. And then also, please recognize that somebody may make a statement that you may not necessarily agree with. But as Voltaire would say, we would like to give them the respect to say their statement. Voltaire would say, I would defend to the death your right to say what it is that you'd like to say. So please give them the respect tonight to ask any question that they may have as well. So as we prepare tonight, I have a question. Can I start?
Yeah.
Go for it.
While we're getting the cards out there? All right, so David, question number one then. Okay. So you're going to hell, what's that like? Just kidding, I have a serious question.
No, I have an answer for that. I think it's going to be a lot like those conventions. For me. Just a bunch of really cool people hanging out. No, you know, it's kind of interesting that you say that, because I've always wondered, you know, as a Christian, if you're a believer and you think that Satan or this demonic creature or whatever it is actually punishing or torturing people because they didn't obey God's laws, it's almost like he's the good guy, right? It's almost like he's working for God, punishing you for being bad. Maybe, you know, why wouldn't it just be that, you know, it's just the appearance and Satan really doesn't care what you do down there, like a really bad babysitter. You know, I've never understood how we could say that Satan is actually hurting people for not following. Otherwise, we would have to say that, in fact, it is God that is overseeing the torture. And that adds a whole new element to what the deity is. But I know you were joking, but still funny.
Hilarious. Can I say something?
Thanks. Please, John.
I'd say first, you have a misunderstanding of of the powers over hell. Satan is not torturing anyone. In fact, he's the first one thrown in there. It's a place specifically for him. It's a place for evil.
So God is in
And
charge
let me
of hell.
finish. God's in charge of everything.
Okay.
So it's the way that you can make the best analogy is darkness is the absence of light. And that's basically what hell is. It's the absence of light. It's the absence, C.S. Lewis puts it excellently. In the end, there's two types of people. Those who say to God, thy will be done, and those to whom God says, thy will be done. So the point is in a sense, God condemns no one to hell. We condemn ourselves by our own rebellion, by our own disbelief and our own distrust. And again, you choose to be in darkness as opposed to becoming available in the light.
Yeah, I don't think it's a choice. I mean, and when you look at the Bible, Isaiah 45:7, God says, I created the light, I created the darkness, I created good, I created evil. God says he created evil in Isaiah 45:7. So all of these bad things that are so hard to defend, like you said, God created it, God's in charge of it. And I would challenge, how do you glorify that? I don't see it.
How do I glorify? Well, let me first say, again, it's not the direct creation of evil. It's the creation of the propensity for evil. In order to, no, don't say, okay, then look to him.
He didn't say I created the propensity for it. He said I created evil.
No, but he created love. And love is a necessity. And you can't have anger if there is no love. You can't have darkness if there is no light. You can't have mercy if there is no justice. There has to be a definitive justice in the universe because we all seek it, we all know it exists, we want it. You want it. That's why you're questioning whether or not hell is fair. The fact that you question whether it's fair tells me that it's true. You just don't like to be judged on that side of it.
Yeah, you put all these absolutes up, John, and you say things like, you can't have this without that. You can't have 3 mornings and 3 evenings without a sun, but your God spoken into existence, you say. So if your God is as powerful as you say he is, he could have had mercy and love without evil. And he could have even had evil, meaning we could be able to fall and break our ankle. We could be able to scratch our arm, even break a bone. But leukemia? Does it have to get that bad?
Okay, but you're jumping all over the place.
But that's my point, is it doesn't have to be that bad.
You're saying you can't have these things. Then it's upon you to explain to me how there can be mercy if there's no judgment. How there can be anger if there is not love. It's impossible. You can't do it.
It's impossible for a dead person to come back to life, but you believe your God made it happen.
Okay, do we
All right, you can't have it both ways. We're not going to do this all night with you.
The natives are getting restless over here.
Let's go ahead.
All right,
that's a
so
good
question number 1. Come on up, Jake. You got a name tag.
Yes.
Come on.
First of all, congratulations with making this film, and thanks for bringing it here and allowing us to watch it and having
Thank you for coming.
This open conversation. I'm curious for each of you, during this filmmaking process, what was the most challenging part, and also what was your favorite or the most rewarding part?
Go ahead. That, by the way, is my action. I don't say
John
action,
would say that. I'm from Texas. I don't understand. He would go, okay, I'm ready. Go ahead.
Action.
Does that go? I don't know what that means.
The most challenging thing to me was, in all honesty, just the emotional, being a spiritual person, the spiritual drain. I don't mean this as a negative reflection against atheism, but to just sit there and hear so many things that you just feel like are just completely opposed to everything you believe, you stand for. And I mean, going on 36, 48 hours straight of this, and defending yourself, defending your God, hearing how horrible your God is constantly, just imagine hearing, someone tell you how horrible your wife or your husband or your loved one is that you love, and boy, that's challenging. You can't necessarily point to it and say, oh, you don't know them, I know them, and they're so wonderful, because, well, where's your evidence? Where's your scientific proof? Where's your observation? So you have to be able to defend yourself with logic and reason, even though sometimes you just want to, just say, you just don't know my God. So that was really the challenging part to me, is just in a respectful way, just putting up with it. It was really challenging.
Thank you. It was a pleasure tolerating you as well, John.
I said in a respectful way. I don't mean it the way it necessarily sounded.
For me, the most challenging thing was, I think, the editing process. because, and many atheists know this, and I don't know if Christianity is like this, and John, you can tell me, but being outspoken or being an activist in the atheist movement, if you just post something on Facebook, your biggest critics are going to be other atheists who want to tell you you should have worded it this way, or why didn't you check him on this part, or why did you let him get away with saying this? And well, how much footage did we have?
8 hours, something.
38 hours of footage.
Yeah.
So if you're wondering, why didn't David say that? I probably did. Okay, I probably did. The problem was the editing and wanting, honestly, as you know, as a partner with John, for him to get his point across fairly, for the film, to be honest, but still get the atheist viewpoints and represent that accurately. And I know now that this thing is officially releasing tomorrow, I'm just gonna, my email is gonna fill up with, you should have said blah, 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 and I'm gonna have to take that. And so for me, it was cutting out all the things that we wanted to say, otherwise it would have been a 38-hour film.
Let me say just real quick.
I'm editing.
15 seconds. It is good, it helps what he says.
5 seconds.
The point of the movie was not to give answers, and you may have gotten that sense. Christians may have been very frustrated at times because I wasn't doing exactly what David said, and atheists may have been frustrated. The point of the movie was not that we provide answers and convince you one way or the other. The point was that we make you think, and that was why we did it that way.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Next question.
John, my question's for you. You stated in the film that evil or pain and suffering is not only part of God's plan, but is God's plan. So my question to you is God capable of changing that plan, and why wouldn't he?
The plan is that we learn, in a sense, that we learn what love is. That's ultimately what the plan is. Now, in order to love, you have to be able to not love. If I force you to love me, you don't love me. You're a robot. I must allow you to divorce me, to not love me. You must be given free will. In given free will...
I'm talking specifically about pain and suffering.
Right, well, I'm getting to that. In given free will, we create this pain and suffering. God allows the pain and suffering. That's why I said in the film, he doesn't directly cause it. He allows it.
You said it was his plan.
Right. It's the plan. The plan is that we learn love. In order to learn love, I don't want to repeat myself, but in order to learn love, pain and suffering is necessary. Anger is necessary. Hatred is necessary. So God has it in his plan that we will go through these things because he gave us a free will. In giving us a free will, he knows all things. He knows that there is going to be that plan. But there is no way for us to know love without knowing pain, suffering, anger, hatred.
Okay. I guess my last question would be then, based on your response, does that mean that I have to cause pain and suffering to my child so that they know love?
No, the ideal was, do you want to clap? The ideal was that we didn't do that. If you read your Bible, first 3 chapters of Genesis before man falls, or the first 2.5 chapters, we don't have that pain and suffering. We have the good. We have the right. We have justice. But then when man chose to exercise his own desire over what God had dictated, and that sounds so horrible to the atheist because we don't want someone dictating our desire, yet you guys dictate it every day when you make decisions. We dictate our own desire. Sorry. So when man dictated his own desire over how God established it, the can of worms was opened up.
And I'll lastly say thank you both for making the film. I appreciate the film.
All right, question number 3.
I want to say something to that just real quick, and I'll keep it quick because I realize you guys want to get a lot of questions in. JT that you saw in the film, he makes a great point in a presentation he makes called Dear Christian. And I think he does it in Dear Christian and Dear Christian Part 2, in where he talks about that very response, that many times we hear from Christians that there's so much evil and pain and suffering in the world that that is because of free will, and you can't force someone to love you, or it's not true love. And I agree with that. I do agree with that, and I think most people would. There are 2 problems with it. For one, it doesn't answer the question for tornadoes, hurricanes, and those scientific phenomena. That it doesn't answer that. People treating each other horribly, absolutely. But you still have all of that to account for. If tornadoes are God's plan, what's his problem? Number one. And then you've got this whole idea that you could have free will even if you removed some of the options. And the example JT gives in his talk is, you're in a building. You can kick the building, you can walk through the building, you can pee on the building, but you can't jump over the building. That doesn't mean you don't have free will because an option has been removed. So back to my first point, you could have evil, you could have scrapes and cuts and pain and suffering and sickness and cold and even death without this, horrific car accidents and tornadoes and torture and rape and cancer. So that level of horrendous treatment of the human race would not be necessary. And lastly, just him showing his existence to us, proving beyond all shadows of a doubt that he does exist, would not automatically force us to love him, because in your belief, you believe that Satan acknowledges his existence yet still turned against him. So Satan still apparently had the free will even though he knew he existed. So those 3 points that I think 2 of those JT touch on, I just wanted to say in addition to that question. Great question, by the way.
First of all, I thought that was a fantastic film. Really thought the production quality was great. You can tell where I stand on the issue, but I thought it was fantastic. My question is, first, David, I'm disappointed you never brought this up. And
there it begins.
There we go.
And
send me an email.
John, I'm sorry your God is such a jerk. No, I was joking about both of those. But you probably did respond to this, and it probably did come up, but I just wanted to hear your response to, you make an appeal to kind feelings when you're describing how you talk to somebody on their deathbed. You just tell them there's nothing after this, but that is really an irrelevant issue, because reality does not care what your emotions are towards reality. So that was my question. It came up twice in the film, and it was probably questioned by people, but I just wanted to hear your response to it.
What you're saying is him having a loving answer or having hope for something has nothing to do with its truthfulness.
Yeah, the value of truth. The value of truth has nothing to do with the value of the emotional placation that it would give somebody.
And I'd say you just answered my side right there. Because the problem is you don't believe that what I'm saying is true. You believe what David said in the film, which is that I'm feeding someone. And I said, I'm not feeding them anything. Well, let me finish. I believe this absolutely as truth. And without going through the rabbit hole to why, the point would be that if I'm correct, if in the end I am right, and that is the truth, then I'm right. And what I tell them is the greatest hope anyone could ever hope for. And if I'm wrong, well, it really doesn't matter, because none of us will have consciousness to know anyway.
It does seem that you were posing the challenge to David of what would David say to somebody who was suffering.
Yes.
But that is not relevant to reality. It's only relevant to the emotions of the person who's suffering.
I would disagree that it's not relevant to reality, because, again, if we're choosing to attribute meaning in a meaningless universe, that's our reality. My reality are my experiences I'm having today. I would borrow from David's argument and say my reality is everything I know and experience on a daily basis. Whether or not it is true or not, it's my reality. That's unfortunate with many mental patients. It's the reality they live in. So for someone to live in a reality where there is no meaningless, or there is no meaning and all is meaningless, and they're about to die and pass on, or they've been suffering for 3 very unfortunate years, there is nothing to give them. There is no hope. There is nothing. And if I say, sorry kid, but this is the way the universe works. It's cold, it's hard, and it's unforgiving. I'm a horrible person for saying that, so my question would be, why am I horrible? Because if that's reality, why is it so important that we have something better than reality? It's because it's there. We know it's there. We're hungry because we know food exists.
Thanks, guys. Just a quick reminder, if you're writing a question on a card or if you'd like to do that, Shirley, our co-producer of the film, will be right here in the pass-through, and you can give that card to her, or she can give you another card as well. Okay, question number 4.
It's for John. I was just taking a guess. I figured it was for John.
I actually have one I really, really want to ask about hell, but we've done a lot of hell, so I move on to another one. I'll leave that one. how important do you think it is that our motto be factually correct? And if you don't think it is factually correct, would you support changing it? Thank you.
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't catch the first part. Is what factually correct?
Our national motto, in God we trust.
Oh, in God we trust.
We
Okay.
collectively trust. Yeah.
How important is it that it's factually correct?
Meaning, if all of Americans don't ultimately trust
not
in
if they're all-
God,
okay.
does it matter that it's factually correct, or should we remove
Well, I
it?
mean, it matters to our eternal soul, yeah. I mean, does it matter to the United States? You know, I, in all honesty, despite the film, I try to avoid a lot of the political conversations because I'm not sure where I weigh in on a lot of things. You know, I do believe into render to Caesar, give Caesar what's Caesar's, and give the Lord what's the Lord. So I choose to give the Lord what's the Lord, and yeah, I pay my taxes and the speeding tickets when I get them. I trust in God. You know, the country, while I understand that that wasn't put in until 1957 or something like that, the country was founded by Christian men who had Christian principles, and they chose to give freedom to others to exercise their principles, as long as it wasn't murdering someone or something. But the point to that as to how important it would be to society in general, I have to say from a biased perspective, it's very important. I wish that all men be saved. I wish that everyone that watches this film agrees like me in less than a year, and that's David included. But I can't dictate that to anyone, so I guess I'm hemming around because I'm not sure where to go with it from the standpoint of, you know, I wish that all people would truly believe that, but if, like David said in the film, if it's just, you know, lying or just pretending, going through the motions, it doesn't matter what it says on a coin. I guess is my answer.
Yeah, all of that religiosity that was inserted in the 50s, the, you know, under God inserted in the Pledge of Allegiance, the in God we trust on the money, all of that, it was all about the Cold War with the Russians, the communists versus the Christians, we're the good guys. It was strictly a political move, and it really should be revisited, honestly, because it's not an accurate representation of all Americans.
So for John, again, I guess, believe it or not.
Will the Christians please come up and ask David a question?
So watching the film, I sort of sat, sort of racking my brain, you know, what's the one thing that's going to stick out that I could ask? Or what's the one thing that's like missing that I just don't understand? Or what's the most thing that's, what's the thing that's most important that a Christian possesses that an atheist or anything but that does not? And you answered it in the film, and that is, I think you answered it in the film, and that is a personal relationship. Beyond all the good that church or a community can do, it is a personal relationship with God, and you answered that sort of like 2/3 through the film. I'm asking you now, if that is the case, while you retain your personal connection with God, do you feel you would be able to accept or condone a completely secular government and secular society?
Christianity exploded and flourished under a pagan government. You know, I know there's many Christians that are very political in activism and want to make the kingdom of heaven here on earth. I don't want to sound like I don't care, but I really don't care. Right. Because, you know, I'm gonna have my beliefs. If Christianity is outlawed, you'll see me on the milk or in the post office. You know, I'll be on the wall. I'll be a criminal. I'll be hopefully a public enemy #1.
And hey, and if Christianity was attempted to be outlawed, I would be standing on the picket line with you. I would, because you have a constitutional right to be theologically wrong.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And so, you know, I guess with that, would I have a problem living under a secular government? You know, it just gives me more people to proselytize to. So I think I'd enjoy it, actually.
Hey guys, we've got 7 more questions I want to try to get through.
Quick.
Can we hustle through them?
Yes.
Give
Okay,
it a shot.
let's
What do you
go
think?
quick.
All right.
Dave's watching the clock. Got it. All right, we've got a high schooler to come up next.
We'll be quicker.
Hi, this one's also for John. Sorry.
I'm just gonna go home. Thank you guys for coming out.
But he's a Christian, I know him.
So you've touched on before, when you're talking about why bad things happen, you've touched upon, well, David has touched upon natural disasters, but I've never really heard your explanation for that, and I'd like to hear it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. John Lennox, professor of mathematics at Oxford University, has a great book out called 7 Days That Changed the World. And in it, he brings up the really interesting point of Genesis early on. Why a garden? Why a garden? I mean, why couldn't the entire earth just be Adam and Eve's garden? Why was there this hedge of protection? And I think a lot of that is symbolic in the sense, I think it was real, but I think it was very symbolic in the sense of God's covering, God's protection. And if you step outside of that, then there is death, calamity, pain, suffering, tornadoes, earthquakes, and insanity. Now, on one hand, I can agree and see that point from John Lennox. On the other hand, I guess I answer it from the standpoint of we were never intended to live forever in this body and in this earth in the condition that it's in. That's why in the garden there is a tree of life. That's why in the garden after Adam and Eve sin, they're banished because of the fear that they would eat from the tree of life. I don't believe that man was ever intended to live eternally in this condition. This is in a sense our testing ground. This is in a sense our ground to learn from what love is. So earthquakes, typhoons, you know, those are developments of a restless planet that we live in. And again, I think that's very figurative, and I don't mean that I think the issue is figurative, but I think you can explain that through, again, you can't have love without anger. You can't have love without hatred. We can't have an eternal paradise without a temporary wasteland that's about to go to hell. And I think that's where we get typhoons and all that from. I don't expect there to be typhoons and earthquakes in heaven.
So you, just to be clear, you think it's because of the fall of man? It's because of sin, ultimately?
No. I think it existed outside of that. I think man was protected from those elements. I think in a supernatural sense, man was protected from tornadoes.
So those, God didn't create those?
No, I think they're out of the necessity of...
God created everything, so he did create tornadoes.
Okay, I see what... Ask it to me from the sense of, is God actually going, boom, tornado? No, I don't believe that. Does God create the conditions in which tornadoes are created? Yes. Same thing with sin. God doesn't, or evil. God doesn't say, I'm going to make this person evil. God says, here's the propensity for evil, and the person chooses to be evil.
That's you making that up. That's not what the Bible says. The Bible says God created evil. Period.
Okay, that's
the way you're
reading. God
some...
created evil.
Okay.
Next question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's go.
So David.
Hey, got a question for me.
This one's for John.
Oh.
I was happy.
That was good. Where was he for the film?
So real quick, as an atheist, can I say, I hope you don't convert to atheism, because I'm not sure that atheism has a better representative than you do. Right?
Okay.
It's true. No, I'm not saying it's a dig. I'm saying that as a compliment.
I felt like a dick. Well, go ahead.
No, I
kind of felt like a dig.
No. It came out as a compliment. Like, you are so fair to atheism. Like, this movie wouldn't have meant nearly as much coming from an atheist. Do you see what I'm saying now?
Okay, that's a little better.
Sorry, I apologize.
Yeah. We like you again. Go ahead.
So I'll try to be quick. In the Bible, Jesus does some pretty awesome things, right? And the mass resurrection, he comes back to Jerusalem, graves open up, thousands of people come back from the dead. We have lots of historians and philosophers and other people who are writing at that time. We have 50 or so. None of that was mentioned. Does that bother you at all? Like, if tomorrow an earthquake came in San Francisco and people came back from the dead, everyone would hear about it. It would be everywhere. But it's not mentioned anywhere, any of Jesus' miracles in any historical, non-biblical, non-religious document.
Yeah, that's only mentioned in Matthew. And I think what becomes I'll try to say this as quick as I can because this is a really deep issue. We're dealing with what's called phenomenological language. We see this, and it wasn't just Jesus' crucifixion, it was Caesar Augustus, both when he was born and when he dies, there were similar miracles like that. It was even recently Kim Jong-il, the father, when he passed away, there were miracles that were seen. This is something that has to do with ancient literature, ancient biographers, in how they tell stories. Now, that doesn't mean Jesus wasn't crucified. We know that that's attested to biblically and outside of the Bible. It doesn't mean Jesus didn't resurrect. The point you're asking specifically is, did people come out of the grave at the crucifixion? Did they walk amongst other people and discuss. That's the part in Matthew that I think you're specifically talking about.
Or any of the miracles. Just take
Well, I don't want to go any of the miracles because I have to deal with them differently. I don't
His
wanna
point is,
go
why didn't any of the major philosophers or historians at that
But that's
time
what I'm
write
saying.
about it?
That's the only part that you can reference that to, not the part that you're referring to is this episode of people coming out of the graves. To make it short, I don't believe that actually happened. I believe what Matthew was doing was very common in those days, which was a way that Matthew was describing the deity of Christ. And this might sound weird to us today, but I guarantee you, if you study ancient literature, you see this repeatedly with important figures. And it doesn't mean Matthew was lying. It means Matthew had a motive behind his writing, which all the Gospels do. And Matthew's motive is very clear from start to finish. And he's a very superstitious Jew that wants to repeatedly show at every step of the way that Jesus Christ is the Messiah, and that's one of the ways in which he did it. If you read, I referenced Plutarch, if you read Plutarch's writings, you get a better feeling of this, because while to us that sounds like lying, to ancient historians, ancient biographers, that wasn't lying. It was phenomenological language that they used to emphasize someone. It would be like me saying, David is really a phenomenal guy. Well, that doesn't mean he's capable of phenomenon. It just means it's language. And I know that sounds weird to people. It's really hard to answer that in a quick statement, but I don't have a problem with that because I recognize it as the language it was in those days. And so did the people.
My response is because it didn't happen. That's why nobody wrote about it.
Yeah, I agree. It didn't happen.
Makes a lot more sense to me.
Again, some of these bigger questions, like submit them on a card. We'd love to get those out in text onto Facebook. Now, I know we're running up against time, and I want people to have a chance to meet you guys in the lobby. So we're gonna try to get through a few more, but a little bit quicker. Can we do it?
Okay.
All right.
Okay. I want to answer all of them. I don't want to leave anyone sitting there, I promise.
David, could you hand this note to John?
Yeah.
I saw him walking up. I knew it was from me. You could go sit down and get a drink, Dave.
In the film, you had that spot where you were talking about like women, how they're treated in a Christian setting, and you're like, you're talking about who I am, and I'm not that person. But knowing the Bible, growing up in the church, I kind of, my sense is that that's you doing that in spite of the Bible, not because of the Bible. And if you, like Sam Harris once, he said, like, if you did 100 people, or, went 100 generations back, a lot of you were probably, killing your kids to change the weather. And as we progress through time, that's gotten better. And then, when the Bible came along, it was a progression. But we've progressed and progressed and progressed. And now, there's a reason the Bible Belt, was the last place where slavery was fought for. There's a reason it was the last place where the government had to get involved and, help these little kids get, integrated into school. And so my question to you is, what is Christianity going to do? How is it helping move the ball forward on these big moral issues when it feels like it's the things that have happened at this point, maybe not 4,000 years ago, but now it's not because of Christianity, it's in spite of it. Everything that we progress seems to be, not a moral charge that's been made by Christians. And so this film was poignant for me because, like, I was a kid in church with your wife and your sister-in-law, and then I've got so many friends here that are on the other side, and sometimes I'm a shit on Facebook and I feel bad, but I care about these big issues, and it feels like my Christian friends never are leading the charge on big moral issues. How do you?
Let me try to answer this quickly. I'd say first, so what you're asking me is, you grew up with this understanding that the Bible endorses slavery, that the Bible endorses oppression of women, and I see it differently. You're assuming that they're right and I'm wrong. I'm going to be very arrogant and say I'm right and they're wrong. I think those ministers are absolutely wrong. I think they don't read the Bible properly. Let me finish. Not just I, but you mentioned oppression and you mentioned slavery. Those were Christians that stood up against, or stood for women's rights. Those were Christians that stood up against slavery. All those movements that demanded, especially in America, civil rights and equality, were spearheaded by Christians who understood the Bible and read it the same way I do. So the fact that there are many out there that don't understand the culture, don't understand the wording, don't understand the timing, don't understand how to read the Bible, they take things on face value in a 21st century mentality and say, oh, women should be silent and not speak in church. they're wrong, and I'll debate them.
Well, it was a mix of people that have fought for those different issues.
Absolutely.
They were spearheaded by
but you're a
Christian
Christian.
organizations, if you look at all of them.
John, you're a Christian, and you're saying that you think women should be able to preach in church, but the Bible is so
Absolutely.
clear on that. It could not be more clear.
No, it's not. No, it's not. Let me say it quickly this way. Okay, there's two things. Number one, the 1 Corinthians passage, Paul says it is against the law. He's not talking about the Old Testament law in regards to women, because there is no reference to women not speaking in church in the Old Testament law. He's speaking of Roman law. It's Roman law that he says it is against the law, number one. Number two, the 2 Timothy, or the 1 Timothy passage, has to do with husbands and wives. The words that are used, we translate as man and woman. The words that are used are andros, not anthropos. And he knows the difference because he uses anthropos, which is man, earlier in the passage, and then he specifically speaks of andros, which is husband, leader of family.
What about when it says, but because the woman first fell into
I was
transgression?
just going to answer that. So when it gets to this point of there being a hierarchy within a family, I believe in that. I believe that I'm the head of my household, that it's my responsibility.
Only because
to
you're a
run my
man,
life.
not because you're more capable.
Yes, because woman fell into transgression first. That's what I'm getting with
So
that.
let me get this
Hold
straight.
on.
Even if your wife had better leadership, because you have a penis, you're the boss.
No. If I fail in my position as CEO, then by all means my wife should be stepping up and being the spiritual leader as well as the moral leader in my family. I'm not acting like the spiritual head anymore. I'm not acting like the man in charge. We've been given a hierarchy. It's in the Trinity. There's the Father who sends the Son and the Son who sends the Holy Spirit. There is a hierarchy. That doesn't mean domination and oppression. Any corporation operates very successfully with a CEO. An oppressive CEO doesn't get much out of his employees. I'm not to oppress at all, but I am the leader of my household, and I think my wife would back that.
But companies that come out and say, only males can be our CEO, they won't last very long anymore.
Well, that's the point I'm making. That's corruption.
And I know we have so many people, but his last question, what is Christianity going to do to progress these major moral issues? Because when you look at those that are stopping the progress, they are hardcore right-wing conservative Christians that want to stop this moral progress and keep drawing lines in the sand based on biblical values. So I think that's a beautiful question. What is Christianity going to do for us to move us forward in the moral realm?
I would think it would do what it's done historically, where while Christian men stood up and promoted and supported slavery, Christian men and women stood up and opposed it. Where Christian men stood up and supported oppression of women, Christian men and women stood up and opposed it. So I would expect Christianity to do the same thing.
We're not doing a very good job on being...
You guys, we are right up at 10:15, and I know you gave me a hard start before that so that you can meet people in the lobby. It's up to you. Your call.
Right. What, you want to go like 15 more minutes?
Sure.
Let's just finish these last questions. Just keep it at the last question.
That's
All right.
about an hour and a half.
And we're going to go fast, I promise.
Okay, we're going to go through.
My question's for John, of course. This is your film, and I appreciate that you did all this. And I get the feeling, though, that a lot of it is proselytizing, and it's your right to do that in your film. But I think it would have been a lot more fair if, in the end, when you did your monologue, that you gave David a chance to respond to that in some manner. Okay, and that's fine.
Do you want me to respond to that? Or?
No, that's okay.
Okay.
I also wanted to say, you did a lot of proselytizing, so I just want to do a little bit here myself. I'm a humanist, and I don't believe in nothing. I believe in the inherent goodness of humanity. We're not burdened by original sin. And my reward is that humanity will continue and be bettered by our efforts and my efforts. Okay? My question, okay, a little bit separate. Your title was Your Week in Atheism, and I thought maybe you would take more of a look at how atheists live. And you did take a lot of viewpoints into account, but you don't really empathize with atheists. And you did make one comment in the movie that when people bring up the flying spaghetti monster, that makes you insulted or angry. Is that?
Irritated.
Irritated. I want you to understand that when Christians present their religion to us and come knocking on our doors and put "In God We Trust" on the money and in the Pledge of Allegiance, that's the way it makes us feel. And that's really important for you to understand that. to stand in our shoes and live your life like that. My challenge to you is to go out as an atheist, present yourself to Christians, and see how they respond to you.
Next film.
I think I've seen that though. I mean, I think I've seen. You can always see more. I understand that, but I think I definitely see it with David, with being around the people that I was around during this film, how they're seen by the world, and you know, obviously I'm with David still, and I don't agree.
We did do a lot of planning and talks about, you know, filming me with my family, filming me with my daughter and my son, and like, cause I go to the gun range. I own guns, and it's rare. You know, for atheists usually, for the most part, are really super liberal and don't want that to happen. And I live in a conservative state. I have my guns, but I'm still very liberal, and I'm an atheist. And so I was like, hey, you know, let's film at the gun range. Let's film with my daughter. Let's show there's a human side to this. And atheists even disagree, and we talked about it a lot. And so he was open to that. I want you to know that. And it ultimately was about filming and timing and things like that. Again, it's one of those things that just we can't possibly fit everything into it. But I do like your challenge that, you know, maybe you should do that. Go be an atheist for a day.
I could probably argue really well as an atheist at this point. I think. I don't know what he'd say.
All right, guys.
No, you couldn't.
I know exactly what he would say.
Whoa!
If you wash it, I'll wear it. One quick point to make though, you know, I just do want to mention, I gave David a hard drive with all the raw footage, you know, and I don't know how that goes with the way other documentarians do their films, but I gave it to him and I said, okay, I'm starting to edit, I'm going to put things together. I don't have the time or the patience to go through every step with you, but you have it. Watch what you want, send me emails, call me, tell me what you want to be in there, what you don't want to be in there. And the reality of it came down to, you know, about a week before we were done editing, we had like one disagreement about one small ending part of it. The rest of it, you know, I was very accommodating and very willing when he said, I need this and I really want this part in. I said, okay. You know,
yeah, as
I
an
wasn't
example,
trying to hide things.
As an example, the footage at my house where we're on the red couch, you know, all of that, the very first cut, none of that was in there. And I watched it.
Because my neck looks so fat. I know. The total truth. When I saw my jowls on that couch, I was like,
I know. I called him and I'm like, John, it's like, man, I made some great points on the couch. I really want to drive those points home.
No.
It was quiet. He goes, but my jowls though. And I'm like,
I will never sit back and have an interview like this.
No, cameras will be up here. You know, greatest weight loss plan ever. Seeing yourself there. But I want to defend John for just a second. That piece at the end, that was planned. We knew that was going to happen. At the end of the day, I was a part of a Christian film. I was, and I knew I was a part of a Christian film. And for most of it, and to respond to the gentleman who just said that to John, I want to tell you, when Aaron Ra was talking about everything in the Bible is immoral, John didn't say anything to that. When Dave Silverman was talking about, I have the right to force Christianity out of my life, John didn't say anything to that. When Matt Dillahunty was talking about slavery and what's wrong with God, John didn't say anything to that. So he was doing it as investigative journalism, and the deal was, at the end, he gets his 60 seconds or so to say his piece, because ultimately it is a Christian film. And despite that, I think he still represented the atheist side very fairly, and so I want to applaud him for that. So.
Thank you.
Hey guys, I'm going to have to cut you off. I know we do this all night. I want to give you a few minutes in the lobby to meet folks that want to shake your hand and do that scratchy thing on your head, which is really cool. I didn't know that you really did that. That's awesome.
Oh, I did. That's my Donald.
Yeah, that wasn't edited later. He does that duck sound.
So why don't you guys head on out, and we'll get you a minute to get out there. Let's give them a hand for their movie tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys.
I'm so sorry though, you folks. Thank you.
Excellent. We'll see you in the lobby, guys, in just a minute. CDs, DVDs, books out there. Stop by and say hi. Thanks for coming out tonight.